I'm wearing my father's wedding ring as I shoot this video. The reason is, Chapter 4 of HTFN FemiNazi is titled Marriage. In my own marriage, I seldom wore my wedding ring. I was an automobile mechanic. I worked with paint and undercoating, and my ring would have been destroyed at work. Or it could have actually been a hazard if it was to be crushed under my finger or caught on something, so I seldom wore it. And one day, long before my divorce, maybe 5 years, we were going out as a family, and I thought, well, here's an opportunity to wear my wedding ring, and I went in my top dresser drawer, and it was gone. And I asked my wife, Stacy, where's my wedding ring? And she said, I don't know. And I looked at her face, and I knew it would be a cold day in hell before I got the truth, a true answer to my question. So I'll read Chapter 4, Marriage. I was born in 1955. World War II had ended only 10 years early, and patriotism was still proudly displayed in every aspect of my life. We prayed and saluted the flag before we started school, before we witnessed sporting events, and for any other reason that made us thankful. I was born to a father who was a Purple Heart recipient in the Korean conflict. He died from an accident when I was not yet 3 years old. 2.5 years later, my mother married an oil company executive who had been a submarine combat veteran of World War II. Every evening, we listened to Richard Rodgers' musical masterpiece, Victory at Sea, at dinner. Every morning, we listened to the Stock Market Report with Jim Van Sickle. I joined the Boy Scouts and the Little League baseball team. My mom played the piano for school musical events and the organ on Sunday for the Dutch Reformed Church. I was a red-blooded American. I call myself a red-blooded American because that's where my love for America resides. Not only does my heart pump this blood, but it pumps the human emotion and sentiment that is my birthright. My heart feels American. My heart feels American exceptionalism. For me, it can be no other way. My parents encouraged and raised me to be independent. In the Coney 2012 film, at about minute 16, a man says, "The greatest thing you can give a child is to make them independent." As a note, I wanted my children to be raised to be independent. My ex-wife Stacy wanted them to be dependent, not only on her, but on licenses and society for the legitimization of their lives. Perhaps my parents would have been well advised to be careful of what they might create. I don't believe that there is such a thing as too independent, but that's an issue that's legitimately arguable. Either way, I was fiercely independent, so much so that I was not impressed with school. The busy work given to class's lowest common denominator was an insult to me. I was easily distracted by my own thoughts as rote knowledge was drummed into people who would probably have little use for it as they trained for a life of mediocrity. The life of personal security that my parents provided for me made it impossible for me to appreciate the struggles that they endured to rise to their own success. I believe that the lack of a serious test of integrity, a test that I too was not forced to endure, is a large part of the problem with my generation and later generations of Americans today. I believe that we have several generations of people who have never been put to a test of integrity, and therefore, as it was for me as a child, they enter adulthood with no experience with adversity. Their mettle is not tempered. Scholarship for me was a joke. My own shameful academic record could only be described as an insult to my school And that is exactly what I intended. My own high school guidance counselor was only interested in guiding me to take out loans so I could provide money for people who I imagined were no smarter than he in his mostly fraudulent education business. I was revolted by the tribalism of people with college, or worse yet, fraternity stickers in the back windows of their cars. I read the work of PhDs who were idiots and wondered who had given them their credentials. Conversely, I could see self-made men who had no credentials of institutional education yet still prospered far beyond the expectations of the pedestrian masses. I imagined that my nature was that of this type of independent man. I set out at the age of 18 with a car and a job at a grocery store to become a man. Though you read me touting the glory of the independent man, I am not a solitary man. I have always been a team player. I learned by observation that men needed wives. In my own family and in my neighborhood, I saw wonderful women. I believe that I began looking for my lady at age 14. Rescuing children was part of my family's heritage. One of my uncles was rescued from poverty and possibly death by my grandmother. My natural father was an orphan. My widowed mother married my stepfather, my dad, who was himself a widower. The consensus was that they rescued each other. They, in turn, had many foster children share our family, 2 of whom entered manhood directly from our family's efforts to complete their upbringing. I met Stacy Gray in October of 1975, only a couple weeks before she turned 18. We took it slow as we started dating, but because her parents were so antisocial towards me, a relationship with them was impossible. I soon realized that Stacy was also eager to get away from them. She needed rescue. We moved in together in January of 1976. I was concerned with birth control. I will never forget Stacy telling me that pregnancy was the least of my worries, that there was no way she would let that happen. She wanted to be a career girl. She just wasn't sure which career it would be, but make no mistake about it, she wanted to prove something to herself for her own dignity. Well, I felt the same way about myself. I really felt that I had found a soulmate. We had nothing but my job at the grocery store, the job she had taken in a payroll department, and each other. I vividly remember complete contentment. We were so poor that we walked to work, sometimes not using our junky car for days. We were so in love that we walked home for lunch every day just to be together for that half hour. Stacy had all that seemed to matter to her. She had her independence from her hyper-controlling parents, the security of a working and financially responsible boyfriend, and her cat. Stacy loved performer Todd Rundgren. At that time, our song was "Hello, It's Me." I'd love to just play a song for you on the recording here, but I fear copyright issues, so I'll just tell you the words. It's "Hello, it's me. I thought about us for a long, long time. Maybe I think too much, but something's wrong. There's something here that doesn't last too long. Maybe I shouldn't think of you as mine. Seeing you, or seeing anything as much as I do you, I take for granted that you're always there. I take for granted that you just don't care. Sometimes I can't help seeing all the way through. It's important to me that you know you are free, 'cause I never want to make you change for me. Think of me. You know that I'd be with you if I could. I'll come around to see you once in a while, or if I ever need a reason to smile, and spend the night if you think I should. It's important to me that you know you are free, 'cause I'd never want to make you change for me. Think of me. You know that I'd be with you if I could. I'll come around to see you once in a while, or if I ever need a reason to smile, and spend the night if you think I should. Think of me, think of me. Stacy broke off relations with her parents and brother completely. Her parents made no effort whatsoever to compromise with her or reach out to me. I must say that I had no respect for them because of their lack of manners and because they were drunks. I felt that Stacy was well rid of them. I felt quite frankly that she was better off with me. Before I met Stacy, I had a high school girlfriend who was rich and whose father was a veteran of military service in Europe, a cardiologist, and the director of the local hospital. Though I was not in his league socially and gave no indication that I ever would be, the good doctor treated me with respect that still leaves me humble to this day. There was no way that I could ever disrespect that man. Stacy's father made me disregard him as a man from the very beginning. When Stacy and I moved in together, it was only 3 miles away in the next town. He never confronted me, and through 22 years of marriage, he never had a man-to-man talk with me. I was his daughter's husband and the father of his grandchildren. After a few months together, a friend of Stacy's visited us and told us that she had run into Stacy's mother and that the woman told her that I was only interested in Stacy's body, that I would throw her out soon and that she would come crawling home. Stacy stewed on that for a few days and then asked me to marry her. I absolutely adored Stacy. I had no problem saying yes. August 15th, 1976, we were married. We had been together for only 10 months. I swear to the world, Stacy and I married because I loved her enough to allow her to marry me to do what she wanted, which was to spite her mother. Marriage was just fine. For 2 years we worked at our menial jobs and improved our circumstances. All I wanted was domestic tranquility, a romantic life of easy satisfaction. It was well expressed in a song called Summer Breeze by Seals and Crofts. At that time, I thought of my life, my wife, and sang that song 1,000 times. Again, I'd love to play this song. I want you to go to YouTube and bring it up and hear it, how beautiful it is. See the curtains hanging in the window in the evening on a Friday night. A little light shining through the window lets me know everything is all right. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind. See the paper lying in the sidewalk, a little music from the house next door. So I walked on up to the doorstep, through the screen and across the floor. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind. Sweet days of summer, the jasmine's in bloom. July is dressed up and playing her tune, and I come home from a hard day's work, and you're waiting there, not a care in the world. See the smile awaiting in the kitchen, food cooking in the plates for two. See the arms that reach out to hold me in the evening when the day is through. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind. So simple and so beautiful. That song was what I had, and it was all I wanted. Each day I walked to work. I passed an auto body shop. I made top pay at the grocery store, which was $5 an hour. The auto body men made 10. I always liked cars, so I discussed with my wife changing my job. I would take a pay cut from $5 to $3 an hour, but if I applied myself, I could make significantly more money. She approved, and we took a step back, then 2 steps forward. I attempted to make up the difference in revenue with overtime. I worked hard. As my pay increased, Stacy's satisfaction with working decreased. After 2 years of marriage, she announced that she wanted to have a baby. At that time, Stacy worked for a veterinarian. We had a 3-room apartment and 4 cats. I told her that having a baby was not like having a cat. That last sentence has a condescending ring to it, and I do not mean to imply that Stacy was mentally deficient in any way. Quite the contrary, Stacy is very wise. We could not afford for Stacy not to work. She told me that she understood this and would work right up to when the baby was born, take a maternity leave, and then return to a job that was baby-friendly. Remember, this was 1978. There weren't the child care systems that are common today. Something would have to be improvised. I trusted her. There had never been a reason not to. Plus, I liked the idea. We were well settled, and though still poor, Stacy was comfortable with her lifestyle. We had money saved to weather the maternity leave period, so why not? It was what my girl wanted. I had my cars, she had her cats, and now we would have our baby. Because contact with cat litter would be harmful for a pregnant woman, the responsibility of her cat box fell to me. Before we knew it, our perfect little girl was born. Monday, April 2nd, 1979, 1 a.m. in the morning. I was never so speechless in my life as when I held her. After an hour, there was no more reason for me to be there. Mommy and baby were resting. We had driven to the hospital on a sunny Sunday afternoon. I had parked the car far out in the crowded parking lot. Now it was the middle of the night and heavily foggy. It was surreal. I walked the empty parking lot, unable to see more than 20 feet ahead of me. Suddenly, there it was, the car, as if in the middle of a dream. I got in and started it. It purred through the empty parking lot, looking for an exit. With me, not lonely, but weirdly alone. The fog made everything so unreal. I had a friend who was a real night owl. I went to his home. Sure enough, he was up, and so was his mom. We celebrated at 3 o'clock in the morning. 5 hours later, I called into the shop where I worked to give them the news and say that I wasn't coming in. I could hardly believe it the next day when I woke up alone and went to visit Stacy and baby Shay. Soon my sister Nikki arrived. She was first to the hospital to see our sweet little girl. The desire for a relationship by my sister with my wife and me should be noted at this time and remembered throughout the story. Stacy glowed throughout the pregnancy and was instantly a wonderful mother. I was proud of her and felt that I had achieved a level of manhood that I was proud of. I was born an American, so I couldn't take responsibility for that blessing. I was born healthy, so that also was not of my making, but I had done the right thing by a good woman. She had borne me a child, and I would always make sure that I would be there for them. I did not have to make a vow. My upbringing and family values would be my guide. I was a family man. I assumed that culturally, Stacy and I were on the same page. Frankly, I had no reference point to assume anything else. Stacy was absorbed with her chubby, happy baby. I was no longer a concern of hers at all. I recognized that she was going through changes that were beyond my comprehension. I gave our relationship all the slack I could. Anyway, Shay needed her more than I did, so I allowed what I thought was nature taking its rational course. There was also a reality for me that I needed to work 2 jobs and grab all the overtime that I could from both. Though I couldn't imagine how she was going to separate herself from Shay and return to work, it would ultimately be necessary for her to do so. 6 months later, the issue was rendered moot when she announced to me that she was pregnant again. Ramping up a whole new job for her was pointless, knowing that she would have to quit anyway. I was okay with allowing Stacy to take care of Shay and enjoy her pregnancy, knowing that a year or so later she would make good on her promise and return to work. I would be able to return to a 5-day work week, or maybe a 6-day work week, and have spare time to pursue some of my own interests. It never happened. After the birth of my son Kaylee, Stacy made it clear to me that she was not going to return to work, and I had responsibilities to my children and their mother that superseded any responsibilities that I had to myself. Truthfully, Stacy was not materialistic, but she didn't want anything specific or fancy. It wasn't for her. No, she never wanted anything for herself. It was always all for the children. She really didn't want anything. All she wanted was everything. I pared back the expectations of finding the limits of my own gifts that I assumed were my birthright to discover, and replaced them with pride in my family. Fred was gone. Now it was all about Stacy, or should I say, the children. I realized that among my children now was Stacy. In the weirdest way imaginable, I was a single parent. Now, at home, I became ignored. It was intolerable. Though I tried to discuss my feelings with Stacy, she was unreceptive. It became so frustrating for me that I moved out. Well, it was ridiculous. First, my separation anxiety was so great that I found it worse than being abandoned in my own home. Second, I did have kids who needed a dad. The idea of not being there was absurd. Fortunately, Stacy called me home. She told me that she had reconsidered our relationship, that she loved me, and that she would make it right. I ran home with wings on my feet. Stacy was my lover girl again, just as it had been only a short time ago. I remember that she had loved me. My anxiety forgotten, I charged myself with being a little selfish. I knew everything would be all right. Well, that lasted about 2 weeks. So that's it for Chapter 4. I'll read Chapter 5 soon. Thanks for listening. I'm Fred Sottile. I'll speak with you again.